Everyone, thank you for coming and hearing me talk today about responsible AI, T&E. So I guess first just jumping straight in, what does that mean? Let's start with responsible AI. So I imagine a lot of people in here are familiar, but the DOD adopted 5 principles for ethical use and deployment of AI back in 2020. And it comprised of 5 main principles. So I'm probably doing them out of order of the memo where it was published. But responsible is basically like, are you able to make good informed decisions with your AI? Equitable, are you able to mitigate any unintended biases? Traceable, do you understand what the system's doing? Do you have the information you need in order to actually understand it and diagnose problems? Reliable, is your system functioning reliable? Fairly traditional requirement. And then governmental, so am I actually able to use the system in the way that it's intended to be used, right? So if I push a button, it does what I wanted it to do. Can I terminate early? That sort of thing. DOD has started using a kind of umbrella term, responsible AI, that kind of eats all the 5 principles when they talk about them kind of in aggregate. And historically, a lot of research in this area has also been called legal, moral, ethical, or LME AI. So if you heard those terms, it's typically a little bit broader, but pretty similar. So the 5 principles are really great, and I think helping us scope what should we care about for responsible AI, but they also introduce a lot of questions. So what does it mean to be traceable? What information do you actually need access to? Who needs access to what information and at what level of kind of technical understanding or aggregation, under what kind of timescales, these kinds of questions. How do you determine or evaluate if a system is equitable, right? Philosophers have been trying to ask themselves, what does it mean to have equality or equity for centuries? So how are we going to actually design a test that's going to quantify and make us feel comfortable that, like, yeah, we can build this? And then at a higher level, not necessarily for individual principles, but what does it mean to really integrate RAI across the product's life cycle? You know, what are the different touch points you need to have across the life cycle, and when and who should be doing this kind of thing? And what does it really mean to be operationally realistic for responsible AI, right? Like, this is a fairly new system requirement that we're trying to consider within the scope of T&E traditionally. So what kind of new operational context do we need to consider? And so as we kind of face with these kinds of questions, we're really reflecting on, you know, what does it mean to try to build a body of evidence that you are actually developing and employing responsible systems. And so this work was done along with my co-authors, who you saw very briefly on the slide, Dan Porter and Jay Dennis. And we're doing this work in collaboration with the CDAO or the JAIC. They're the kind of follow-on organization, so I may use those words or acronyms interchangeably throughout this. And so if we try to start building a framework of what does it really mean to test RAI over the life cycle of a product, what do we need to be asking ourselves? What questions do we need to be answering? What do we need to be striving to do? First, we really need to embrace that T&E is really a very, very necessary part of the RAI puzzle. So RAI, you cannot take for granted that building a system, it's going to be responsibly designed, that it's responsibly employed. We're going to have to build a body of evidence in the same way we would for performance, reliability, or safety. And T&E is going to be a very large part of trying to build that assurance case. And I know a lot of times people think of Terminator, but this is also true for DoD non-combat systems as well, right? So something making very critical decisions about staffing or promotions also really needs to be subject to these same ideas like traceable and equitable and things like that. But they're going to really have to be interwoven across the product life cycle. I know, you know, we already kind of see testing as DT and OT, but we're really going to have to continue to shift left and right in a way a lot of other talks and conversations are happening as well, that RAI is not exempt. You know, early design decisions about our data sources that we use or what kinds of algorithms that we pick are going to have huge ramifications on things like traceability or your ability to, you know, govern the system in different capacities or terminate the system. So we really have to shift left in this way, but also shifting right. Same problems we really have with complex software and AI generally. You can't test everything. And And then also as we, continue to have things fielded and you have data drift or ConOps drift, we're gonna have to continue to monitor systems after they're fielded and make sure that we can continuously feel comfortable that we're employing responsible systems. How are we gonna translate these into actionable guidance? As I mentioned, as I was going through, what is traceable, what is equitable? We're really gonna have to actually start nailing down what does this mean for different types of programs? What does this mean for different types of use cases? What does this mean for different types of algorithms? How are they all interacting, right? So my ability to responsibly employ a system and in the context of the specific responsible principle, it means to basically make responsible decisions. Well, that's going to be very, very contingent on my ability to have traceability, right? I need information to inform me to make a good decision. But then that's also going to speak to governability, right? If I can't make a good decision, my ability to govern the system is going to be compromised. So in reality, these are very, very intertwined. How do we tease these apart in such a way that enables me to actually identify parameters that will speak to the 5 principles and make me feel comfortable that I've built that assurance case? And then, developing, testing, evaluating in context. And this is something that we all know that we have to do for all of the things we're trying to measure and test and evaluate. But this is going to be so very, even more so true for RAI. So, one, moving things like context earlier, making sure that we have RAI relevant context in our actual data sources, things like that. And just making sure that also, as I mentioned, they're all kind of interconnected, but also a lot of RAI stuff speaks to other performance metrics. So, right, I mentioned, governability a couple of times, your ability to use a system. Well, that's very directly going to speak to performance as well. So understanding that in reality, I can put RAI as a bucket of type of evaluation. I can put traceable and governable in a bucket for evaluation. But in actual operational context, all these lines are going to get very blurry. And if we're actually going to test these things and build assurance cases before we build them, we're going to have to find ways to streamline different types of evaluations and making sure that we're not duplicating efforts. And finally, just threw a lot of stuff at people. And everyone knows that AI expertise in the DOD T&E communities, it's pretty rare. We're trying to develop it, but there's not enough to have experts on every system. And this is going to be doubly true for people that have an overlap between, AI expertise and responsible AI expertise. So CEOs are really trying to basically kind of take these core tenets of objectives that they want to accomplish and generate products that will enable them to empower novices and help them get first defensible drafts going of RAI evaluation plans and helping them. So the CDOs building a framework, and we're collaborating with them and contributing or building the framework for them. And it's comprised of 4 main products. The first is just a vision statement. It's actually with their pubs people right now, and it's basically an articulation of the 5 points that I just gave. This is the scope and goals of the framework, what they hope to achieve with it. The current kind of work in progress is a white paper, which is really trying to reflect on kind of current DOD acquisition within the adaptive acquisition framework, and specifically really looking at the software pathway of trying to really anchor where are RAI and T&E touch points across this life cycle. What boxes do we need to be checking as we move along to make sure that we're sufficiently building, confidence in our systems as we develop and test and eventually build them. And then we hope to follow up with additional products. The next one would be looking at the interdependencies of the principles. What does it actually mean to measure it? What are measurements that you can come up with and be like, yes, I feel very confident that I have, measured what it meant to be equitable. And I think also reflecting and being like, there are going to be cases where there is no magic number. And so what are other kind of risk reducing activities or processes that we can encourage or require that would further kind of reduce RAI risk before you actually field the system? And then hopefully kind of taking all of this together once we've built the first 3 products and merging it together into a guidebook, so that people can say, okay, I understand what the different metrics available are to me, the different processes for reducing risk. I understand where they fit within the life cycle. And now I can put this all together in a guidebook to give to PMs and testers so that they have some very tangible guidance on how to actually try to achieve RAI for their systems. And I won't say questions because Denise tells me that I'm never allowed to. But you can see my contact information here. I don't have a poster, but I'll be wandering around. So please feel free to grab me if you need anything.
Okay, thank you so much.